The DNA test wasn't supposed to show this. Emma Clark thought she'd finally get answers about her biological father. Instead, she discovered something that shouldn't be possible. The lab called 3 times to confirm. They'd never seen results like this in 20 years of testing. When Dr. Phil read the report backstage, his hands went still. He looked at the producers and said one word: how? What Emma was about to reveal would challenge everything we understand about family, identity, and the lengths some parents go to create the perfect child. Emma sat in the green room, clutching an envelope she'd already opened a dozen times. Each time she read it, the words still didn't make sense. She was 23 years old and had spent her entire life believing a simple story. Her mother, Dr. Catherine Clark, a brilliant geneticist, had used an anonymous sperm donor to conceive her. Single mother by choice. Nothing unusual. Nothing to hide. But 6 weeks ago, Emma had ordered a DNA test out of curiosity. Maybe she'd find half-siblings. Maybe she'd learn about her ethnic background. Maybe she'd even find her biological father. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. Emma was at work when the email arrived. She opened it during her lunch break, expecting percentages and ancestry charts. Instead, she got a phone call from the lab supervisor. "Ms. Clark, we need to run your sample again," the woman said, her voice uncertain. "There seems to be an error in our system." "What kind of error?" Emma asked. A long pause. "Your results are showing a genetic match that we can't explain. We've never seen anything like this outside of identical twins." "But I don't have a twin," Emma said. "That's why we need to retest." They retested. Same results. They tested a third time using a different lab. Same impossible conclusion. Emma wasn't just related to her mother. According to the DNA analysis, she was genetically identical to her mother. Not similar, not closely matched. Identical, as if her mother had given birth to herself. Now, sitting backstage at the Dr. Phil show, Emma was about to confront the woman who'd raised her. The woman who'd apparently created her in a way that defied nature. The producer knocked on the door. "We're ready for you." Emma stood, her legs unsteady. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say. "But how do you confront someone who might have cloned you?" She walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely, unaware of what was coming. Dr. Phil greeted her warmly, then gestured to the chair beside him. "Emma, thank you for being here," he said. "I know this took courage." She nodded, unable to speak yet. "Before we bring your mother out, I want to make sure I understand what you've discovered. You took a DNA test expecting to learn about your father. But instead, you learned something about your mother. Something shocking. Can you tell us what you found?" Emma took a breath. The studio lights felt too bright. She could feel thousands of eyes on her, even though the audience was only a few hundred people. "The test showed that I'm not just my mother's daughter," Emma said slowly. "According to the DNA results, I'm her identical twin. Genetically, we're the same person." The audience erupted in confused murmurs. Dr. Phil held up a hand for silence. "Now, for those watching who might not understand the science here, Emma, help us out. What does this actually mean?" "It means," Emma said, her voice stronger now, "that my mother didn't just conceive me. She replicated herself. I'm not her child. I'm her clone. To understand how Catherine Clark could do something like this, you have to understand who she was." Dr. Catherine Clark was a pioneer. At 32, she'd already published groundbreaking research on genetic replication. She'd worked with stem cells, studied cellular aging, and pushed the boundaries of reproductive science in ways that made colleagues both admire and fear her brilliance. She was also desperately lonely. Her career had consumed her 20s and early 30s. While friends got married and had children, Catherine stayed late in the lab, chasing discoveries that might change the world. By the time she looked up from her microscope, she was 38 years old and single. She wanted a child, but she didn't want a partner. She'd spent too long being independent to compromise now. So she decided to do it alone. That's the story she told everyone, including Emma. Anonymous donor. IVF. Simple, modern, unremarkable. But the truth was far more complicated. Emma grew up in her mother's shadow, literally. People constantly commented on how much they looked alike. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same sharp jawline. "You're practically twins," strangers would say, laughing. They had no idea how right they were. Catherine raised Emma with precision. She monitored her health obsessively, tracked her development, documented every milestone. Emma thought it was just what dedicated mothers did. She didn't realize she was a research subject. There were signs, though, small things that didn't add up, like the way Catherine would stare at Emma sometimes, studying her face with an intensity that felt clinical rather than maternal. Or the medical tests that seemed excessive, blood work every 6 months, genetic screenings for conditions Emma didn't have family history for. I just want to make sure you're healthy, Catherine would say. Prevention is everything. Emma trusted her. Why wouldn't she? Catherine was her mother, her protector, her only family. But when Emma turned 21 and asked about her father for the first time in years, Catherine's reaction was strange. Why does it matter? She'd snapped. I'm your parent. I'm enough. I know you're enough, Emma said carefully. I just want to know where I come from. It's natural to be curious. Catherine's expression hardened. Some questions are better left unasked. That conversation planted a seed of doubt. And 2 years later, that seed grew into the DNA test that would expose everything. Now Emma knew why her mother had been so defensive. Catherine hadn't used a donor at all. She'd used her own genetic material to create a duplicate of herself. The question was, why? Dr. Phil gestured toward the wings. Emma, your mother is backstage right now. She knows why you're here. She knows what you've discovered. Are you ready to face her? Emma nodded, though her hands were trembling. Let's bring her out. Dr. Catherine Clark walked onto the stage with the composure of someone used to being in control. She was 51 years old, but could pass for 40. Elegant in a way that suggested discipline rather than vanity. She sat down without looking at Emma, her expression unreadable. Dr. Clark, Dr. Phil began, your daughter just told us something extraordinary. She says the DNA test proves she's not just your biological child. She's your genetic clone. Is that true? Catherine was silent for a long moment. The audience held its breath. Yes, she finally said. It's true. The studio exploded with gasps and shocked whispers. Dr. Phil raised his hand again for quiet. Help us understand, he said. How was this even possible? Human cloning is illegal in most countries, Catherine interrupted, but not impossible. The science has existed for decades. It's just been forbidden. So you broke the law, Dr. Phil said flatly. I did what I felt was necessary, Catherine replied, her voice steady. I want a child. I didn't want to introduce unknown genetic variables into my life. I knew my own health history. I knew my own capabilities. So I made a choice. Emma finally found her voice. You made a choice? What about my choice? Did I get a say in being created as your duplicate? Catherine turned to her daughter for the first time. You exist. Would you prefer not to? That's not the point, Emma shot back. The point is you treated me like an experiment, like property. You didn't give me a father. You didn't even give me my own DNA. I gave you the best possible genetic foundation, Catherine said. Do you know how many people suffer from inherited diseases? How many children are born with genetic defects that ruin their lives? I eliminated that risk. I gave you a perfect start. I didn't want perfection, Emma said, tears streaming down her face now. I wanted to be my own person. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Dr. Clark, do you understand what Emma is saying? She's telling you that her entire identity has been built on a lie. Everything she thought she knew about herself is still true, Catherine interrupted. She's still Emma. She's still talented, intelligent, capable. The method of her conception doesn't change who she is, but it changes who she thought she was, Dr. Phil countered. And that matters. Could you ever forgive someone for creating you without your consent? For making you a copy instead of an original? But there was more to the story, and Dr. Phil had done his homework. Dr. Clark, I want to show you something, he said, pulling out a folder. Before this taping, our team did some research. We found something interesting in your published papers from 25 years ago. Catherine's composure cracked slightly. What are you talking about? You wrote extensively about genetic replication and its potential applications. But in one paper, you mentioned a personal motivation. You wrote, and I quote, the ability to preserve not just genetic material but genetic identity could offer hope to those facing terminal illness or premature death. He looked up at her. Your older sister died when you were 19 years old. She was 22. Ovarian cancer. Is that right? Catherine's face went pale. That has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? Dr. Phil pressed. Because according to medical records we obtained with Emma's permission, you started experiencing early symptoms of the same genetic mutation that killed your sister. You were diagnosed with BRCA1 positive markers when you were 36 years old. Emma turned to her mother, confused. What is he talking about? Catherine closed her eyes. I didn't want to worry you. You have a genetic predisposition to cancer, Dr. Phil explained to Emma gently. The same one that killed your aunt. And your mother knew about it before she conceived you. The pieces were falling into place now. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. You cloned yourself because you thought you were going to die. Catherine didn't deny it. I was terrified. I watched my sister deteriorate in 6 months. I knew I carried the same risk. I wanted to leave something behind. Not just a child, a continuation. If I died, you would still be here. A version of me that could keep going. But I'm not you, Emma said. I'm me. And you didn't tell me any of this. You let me grow up thinking I was normal, while you were monitoring me for symptoms of a disease you gave me on purpose. I gave you life, Catherine said, her voice breaking for the first time. I gave you a chance to exist. Yes, there are risks, but there are risks for everyone. At least you're here. Dr. Phil shook his head. With all due respect, Dr. Clark, that's not a gift if it comes with conditions Emma never agreed to. You treated her like a science experiment, like a backup plan. Catherine looked at her daughter, and for the first time, her mask fully crumbled. I know what I did was wrong. I know I should have told you. But I wanted you so badly. And I was so afraid of dying alone, of disappearing without leaving any trace. You have to understand. I understand that you were scared, Emma said quietly. But that doesn't make this okay. The studio was silent. 2 women, genetically identical, sat facing each other like strangers. After the taping, Emma didn't go home. She checked into a hotel and sat alone in the dark, trying to process what she'd learned. Her entire sense of self had been built on false foundations. She wasn't just Catherine's daughter. She was Catherine's replica. Every time she looked in the mirror, she was seeing her mother's face at 23. Every achievement, every personality trait, every quirk, how much of it was really hers and how much was just genetic programming. The existential crisis was overwhelming. But here's what Emma realized over the next few weeks. Her mother had made a terrible, unethical choice. But Emma herself was still real. Her thoughts were her own. Her experiences were her own. Her choices were her own. Being a clone didn't make her less human. It made her different. And maybe that was okay. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in identity issues. She joined online support groups for people with unusual conception stories, donor-conceived children, surrogacy situations, IVF complications. She wasn't alone in feeling complicated about her origins. Slowly, Emma began to rebuild her sense of self. Not as Catherine's daughter, not as Catherine's clone, just as Emma. 3 months after the Dr. Phil episode, Catherine reached out. She'd written a letter. Emma almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. The letter was different from anything Catherine had said before. No justifications. No science. Just honesty. I made you for the wrong reasons, Catherine wrote. I was selfish and scared and convinced myself that good intentions justified unethical means. They didn't. You deserve better. You deserved a mother who saw you as a person, not a continuation. I'm sorry I failed you in that way. I can't undo what I did. But I want you to know that everything good about you, your kindness, your strength, your ability to question things I never questioned, that's all you. That was never me. Emma read the letter 3 times. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it was a start. She called her mother for the first time since the show. The conversation was brief and awkward, but they agreed to meet, to try, not as original and copy, just as 2 people trying to figure out how to move forward. Emma's story raised questions that reached far beyond one family's dysfunction. In the weeks after the episode aired, bioethicists weighed in. Religious leaders debated. Scientists argued about the implications of reproductive cloning and whether Catherine Clark should face criminal charges. Some people sympathized with Catherine. They understood her fear of death, her longing for continuity. Others were horrified by what she'd done, calling it the ultimate act of narcissism, creating a child not to love but to replicate. Emma stayed mostly silent during the media storm, but eventually she agreed to one interview. A journalist asked her the question everyone wanted answered. Do you wish you'd never been born? Emma thought carefully before responding. No, she said. I'm angry about how I was created. I'm hurt by the lies, but I'm glad I exist. I'm glad I have a life, even if it started in a morally questionable way. I didn't ask to be born, but none of us do. What matters now is what I do with the life I have. It was the most mature answer anyone could have given. As for Catherine, she faced consequences. She lost her medical license. She was investigated for bioethics violations. Her career, the thing she'd sacrificed everything for, was over. But in losing everything, she gained something unexpected, a real relationship with her daughter. Not the perfect clone she'd imagined, but the complicated, independent, resilient person Emma had become despite, or maybe because of, her unusual origins. They meet for coffee now once a month. The conversations are still difficult sometimes. They're still hurt, still questions, still a long road to anything resembling trust. But they're trying, and maybe that's all any parent and child can do. Try to see each other as they really are, not as they wished each other to be. Would you be able to forgive the person who created you for all the wrong reasons? If this story made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Emma's journey reminds us that identity isn't just about genetics. It's about choices, experiences, and who we decide to become. We don't control how we come into this world, but we do control who we are once we're here. What would you do in Emma's situation? Could you forgive the unforgivable? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories that challenge everything we think we know about family, truth, and what it means to be human, subscribe. Because sometimes the most extraordinary stories are the ones that force us to question everything.